Okay. Yeah, so after the introduction of the note here, we wanted to just have some candid conversation about the response. And so we've got some startups, investors, we've got Matt, to have a little fireside chat about what this all means for the industry, how it can be applied. And again, love to hear your thoughts as we're doing this. So why don't we do... And we'll make this quick. I know we're going, it's getting late. You guys have been very patient. And so we'll keep this fairly brief. But let's start with a quick round of introductions. I think we'll start with you, John.
Hey guys, I'm John Idell. I'm a CEO and co-founder of Fion Technologies. We are working on a platform for over-the-air wireless power transfer. Ranging from, say 15, 20 feet, doing multiple watts, safe, efficient compared to others in the space. And my background is hardware engineer, mainly electrical. Cut my teeth in engineering at SpaceX back in the early days before Elon went haywire. And now, working about 5 years on this startup and based out of Circuit Launch. So glad to be here.
I'm Scott Summit. I had a venture-backed company called Bespoke, and we did a lot of work in 3D scanning the body and 3D printing exoskeletal products, namely prosthetic limbs and scoliosis bracing. That was acquired by 3D Systems, and we ran the design center there for a number of years, the kind of design innovation thing in South Market. Now I have a company called Ethereal, and we're based over at Circuit Launch. And it is a robotic interactive structure that lets you physically interact with the virtual world when you have a VR headset on. It's ostensibly for fitness, but it's also for entertainment or immersive interaction. Has anyone here done the demo? Okay, a lot of the Bay Area has done the demo. So if you're in Circuit Launch, track me down. It is worth checking out.
I've seen it. It is worth checking out. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Wallace. I'm a co-founder of a couple of startup accelerators, one of which is Silicon Valley in Your Pocket that Greg spoke about earlier. The other one is called The Batchery, based over in Berkeley. And in addition to that, I was a serial entrepreneur for most of my career, some good outcomes, some not good outcomes, and also do a little bit of angel investing. So I'm here to kind of represent a little bit of those various perspectives.
Okay, so we've had a lot of discussion, and really we just want to hear about your guys' perspective. And I think as startups first, you guys are raising money, you're in conversations with investors. What are you thinking about? What are the challenges? And how do you feel like some of these things with the Hero Note might be good, be bad, not work, not work? Just honest feedback here. Let's start with you, John.
Yeah, I think, from our perspective in fundraising, what we've done, previous rounds is gone the VC route, tried to raise from more conventional VCs and end up hearing like, you're too early, we want to see traction before we actually buy in. And ultimately, as the hardware founder, you're like, I need the money to build the thing that's going to get me traction that you want to see the investment. So having an alternative to be able to raise that capital, especially with potentially, a contract manufacturer that is very, very close, understands a lot of the ins and outs of what you're going for, is pretty attractive. And, I think ultimately my feeling on the Note, just like a new instrument being introduced to the ecosystem is, how many people are going to use it? Like how popular is it going to be? And I'm interested to see, if this thing has legs for sure.
Yeah, we had the same problems for all the reasons mentioned. We're high CapEx. The machine will probably weigh in at about 17,000 for our COGS, so maybe 30 for the street price. So we talked to all the VCs, and they gave us the same kind of stuff that you hear from VCs that everybody's all very familiar with. We ended up working with a group now that is forming, that is connecting Silicon Valley startups with Taiwanese investors and manufacturers. And there seems to be these kind of liaising groups that are starting to materialize. This is the Dr. Galen Chen, the ex-CTO of Foxconn, and then Eric Almgren, who created HDMI and things like this. And they're now a collective, and they are doing this liaising. process. So we spend a lot of the summer out in Taipei and Taichung. Weird thing there that we encountered is that as terrified of atoms as VCs are in Silicon Valley, is how amenable to atoms Taiwanese are. It's the weirdest thing. As soon as you throw robots here, VCs run for the door and they curl up in the men's room. As soon as you talk about atoms and robots and AC servos in Taiwan, they're just like, yeah, we got this. This is what took us from a rice farming island into a first world nation that China's afraid of. So they are absolutely on their game when it comes to working with hardware. So we are working with CMs. They are a bit naive as far as the funding mechanisms go. So right now we are actually today, in fact, we're structuring a deal with some CMs where they'll be investing in kind. So we have a $6 million safe note out. We hope to fill that through any number of creative means, but 2 to 3 million of that will be coming from work in kind that'll be milestone based from Taiwanese CMs. And they'll be taking us up to our MVP, which will be pilot units, which we'll release out in the wild. It's a work in progress, so I can't say if it's smart or stupid. Time will tell.
Nothing. Go ahead.
Question to you.
Oh, yeah.
It's just for the recording. Would you be willing to use the Hero Note instead of a safe note with the CMs in Taiwan?
It's interesting. I'm gonna have to run this by the guys who are more numbers minded than designer or me. The safe note is a familiar entity to them, and it might be a while before we're shipping any product at all. And we have super high capex. We're going to be in the millions, and so getting that kind of return is going to be trickier. So that's something that we have to look at. But I'm going to be running it by my guys and see. I can't in my head on my kind of napkin math evaluate where it tips the scales.
Yeah. So I think Jeff and we're kind of tooting our own horn a little bit here, but from the investor's perspective, you've invested a lot of early stage businesses. You've gone through the mental math to think about these things, and where do you see this as a different approach potentially to how you would think about coming into a startup?
Yeah, from my perspective, these businesses, hardware businesses, look a lot like a life science or a bioscience business where there's a lot of capital intense investment required up front and a long tail before you get a payout. So really, I think the Hero Note, beyond for the hardware businesses, I think if it proves to work here, I think it will work for other long tail kind of capital intensive businesses. So for us, when I look at what like you're describing, Scott, I look at it and I think investors, like I think both of you were saying, investors give you the same spiel, right? Come back when you have more traction. It's also they know a long tail and a lot of money before they get to a return. So the idea of the Hero Note is to provide a faster return, right, in some capacity, because it's coming out of the unit profit, not out of the company profit, and they don't have to wait until an equity exit. They can at least start to get some of that money recouped. So I personally, as an investor, have invested in this deal. One of my own origins of the Hero Note was a hardware company that we did a deal like this. We did this kind of royalty-based. I think somebody brought it up earlier, right? I think it was you. You brought it up earlier about the royalty like on the Shark Tank. We did a deal like that with an upstart hardware company, and it begot them a good amount of investment, but they were struggling up until that point because people kept thinking it's a lot of money in before I see anything out. So a lot of money and a lot of time. So that's how I, as an investor, look at this, is I really feel like the Hero Note gives investors a chance to recoup some of that investment much faster than they would in a normal scenario with a more traditional, safer convertible.
So as through your investor lens, are you seeing it as you have more downside protection, therefore you're more willing to engage?
Absolutely. I mean, it's de-risked a little bit if I start seeing, depending on how close you are to the first sale of units, right? Yeah. But again, the negotiation of the Hero Note is it doesn't have to start at unit 1. It could start at unit 2,000 or unit 5,000. So, but that's still faster than a normal traditional convertible or safe note investment. So yeah, I think it's faster return, which to me is just an element of de-risking.
And to that point, right, as an investor, unless you make it big in the traditional sense, you're not seeing any of that money back, right? That startup is, for the most part, going to spend that money trying to get to that next round, right? But with a Hero Note, you actually maybe you can get 30% or, you know, kind of 50% or some reasonable amounts that is much more than zero. All right. Hey, so Terry has really made the biggest journey of us all tonight. And made it on time. So, yeah, why don't you do a quick introduction? And
Yeah, thank you all. Sorry I missed. Landing gear was stuck down. We were a third of the way here and we turned back around. But Terry Arbaugh with CComp. We are a contract manufacturer primarily. So we also do product development, design, and engineering for products that we will be the manufacturer for. We historically have not invested in our customers. We've kind of kept a pretty clear line between those two things, but there's a lot of really interesting things about the Hero Note that I'm curious how this discussion's going. So I'll leave it there.
you know what? Pretty much all the rest of us have been talking a lot tonight. We've had great questions and everything. So, yeah, and really the big missing piece that hasn't been covered very much is the contract manufacturer perspective that we've touched on a lot tonight. I'm really glad you made it. And we'd love to hear, you know, I know you guys don't traditionally do this, and you know, we're in the same boat. I've never fully, we've invested a little bit in kind, but have been asked many times. I've never pulled the trigger. One thing you learn from working with 1,000 hardware startups is just how risky it can be, right? And it's a bit of a gamble, but would love to hear your thoughts on, yeah, this new mechanism or questions.
Yeah, and fire away any questions from my perspective. There's a lot I could say. One of the ways that we operate our company, and we have a factory in China. We're opening up a factory in Tijuana currently. Like I said, we have product development engineering. You know, we have a full staff, a few hundred people probably in total around the globe. As we've grown this company, we kind of have a mantra of earn the right to grow, right? In each division, you know, you kind of have to make small bets and prove them off to keep getting further investment. And this kind of, the Hero Note kind of feels like that in a way to me, right? So like you're saying about the de-risking, if there are smaller bets to get a startup to certain milestones or to at least some sort of revenue generation where you can say, okay, I gave you this much and you've given that back. Like, all right, let's go a little bit farther, right? So I think that aspect of it is intriguing, right? It's when you're just giving a lot of money to startups that can be really risky, despite how great the idea and how great the team might seem. There's so many things outside of your control that giving a huge chunk of money for a very long time before you see a return is not great from our perspective. So being able to kind of make some of those bets and see them pay off is really interesting. Where you spend the money from our perspective, right? You know, product development, doing engineering is expensive, tooling is expensive. Quite often, even if you get all the way through those things, you get through certifications, you start shipping, you've got to buy inventory. If you don't have any credit as a startup history with a company like us, we're not going to fund you. If you can't get funding from friends or family or investors or banks, why would we? Is our position generally? You know, so we kind of take that approach. So if you don't have the funding, not only to get all the way through NPI and through development, but also to start buying materials and components that might have 20 and 30 and 40 week lead times to where, you know, once you place an order and we start buying things, you don't want to wait months and months and months to start shipping, right? So how do you shortcut that? Well, you start buying materials, and we require deposits generally if you don't have credit terms with us, right? So the cash required up front just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, especially as you're successful, right? So it's a really, really challenging thing for a hardware startup to really get going. So the Hero Note, the part of it that intrigues me is that we could make some smaller bets again if it was used for, I think one of the things I would want to clarify with if we took this on would be, you know, it's used for anything related to the business. I would be a lot more specific around which business uses, salaries, marketing, parties, off the table. And I'm a sales and marketing guy, so I'm not bashing marketing or parties. But, for hardware, for components, for inventory, for specific items related that are going to help you sell and generate revenue would be where I'd want to refine that bit a little bit more. So I could probably keep going, but I don't know. I feel like that's a good start.
No, I want to jump in there because the CM perspective is a real interesting one on this note. Take a CM, you have a book of business of customers that are paying conventional to your terms. Like, where and it's guaranteed money up front. Like, what's the incentive to like take this risk when you even if you're not at capacity, if you're close to capacity, like why would you do this?
It's a great question. Our core purpose has been helping innovators deliver awesome is one of the things that we say. So we live by that, and we have a lot of really large companies that are customers, but also small companies we want to root for. We want to help succeed, right? So if we can, in a safe, fiscally conservative sort of way, help somebody be successful, in this really difficult world we all live in, that is a core value of our business, right? So as corny as that might sound, there are reasons why we want to see people and entrepreneurs, especially in hardware, be successful. The other thing is, we're business people, and particularly being kind of responsible for sales and revenue generation. You can see some companies and some teams that that's going to work. You can almost, we all think, so take this with a grain of salt, but you see something that works. Generally, one of the things that we look for as who we let in the door, especially with startups, are they funded? But more importantly, do they have somebody on their team that has done hardware before, right? So if you get 3 software guys that come and say, hey, it's 90% done, we just need you to finish it. Like, hey, we 3D printed some prototypes. I mean, it's pretty much ready, right? So that is, thanks, good luck. Let me introduce you to a few of our partners that might be a better fit for you, right? But if they've done it before and they've got some funding, and it feels like there's a good market out there, and we can also de-risk things. So we'll set up our contracts sometimes with customers where we might be staging materials, but we will work with our supply chain to set up friendly terms. So we're not going to go buy 10,000 sets at one time. We may say, we want the 10,000 piece price. We're going to take 500 pieces twice a month, right? And if we cancel it, we'll have an understanding or a little bit of an agreement where we can cancel without a real penalty, right? But that doesn't get the startup ultimately the best price. But in order for us to take that on, we have to try to figure out all the different ways we can hedge, so good enough answer?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. Even if you're at capacity, there's ways to grow, right? And you definitely want to be tied to exciting companies that are growing and potentially taking over a whole new market, right? Those are the customers you really love. We answered so many questions. I feel like getting back into the note itself. I mean, we've talked about a lot of the mechanisms. Do you guys have any things off the top of your heads that you would like to add to the conversation or talk about in particular? Because I can go into deeper stuff, but yeah. So I think, hey Matt, we need you up here. So 3 weeks ish. Can we have a final ish version ready for consumption? The Hero Note. Can we launch it live in, what do you think, the time frame? 3 weeks or sooner?
I just need to make, based on the feedback from the group. Based on the feedback from the group, there's definitely some holes in the Hero Note that I need to fill. So it'll probably take me another 2 weeks to probably fill those holes. And then I want to build in the optionality of the principal being paid back on the units rather than a maturity date. Because I think that is a huge issue of this giant balloon payment that is sitting out in the ether for these companies that could kill them. And I don't like that idea. And so based on what I'm kind of feeling and seeing on people's faces, I think that is I'm going to build in an optionality into it, but I think it's one of those things that the startup needs to be able to choose that. So I'm going to build in that, and then we're going to fill in the gap of what happens if we discontinue product A and we switch to product B. Yeah. So I think that whole and this are the two things that I need to draft. Other than that, I think we're good. So.
Yeah, it's real close. And so when we do launch it, we will make that, and it's a sort of Creative Commons sort of license, basically, that everyone can use it.
It's free, and if you can't sue me.
Can't sue Matt. You got to sign off on that. And there are certainly a lot of variables that you'll want to take a look at and get a lawyer to, there's lots of flexibility, which means.
Want a lawyer to help you finalize it. Like, the safe note is super easy to fill in. There's literally like 3 fillables. Any startup founder can do it. I don't recommend that with this. There are a lot of fillables. There's a lot of liability. There's a lot of different things. I highly recommend that you find an attorney that can help advise you on these things and craft it. Like, this is a very good starting point. This is a 25-page plus document. This is not a safe note that's 5 pages. So just be aware.
Yeah, we didn't. It is a long document. We didn't share that tonight, but there's a lot of that. That's what creates a lot of flexibility. Is that there's lots of conversion methods and other things in there to keep everybody safe.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
I think there will be a case by case by startup, and by manufacturer, whatever the partnership is. There'll be a lot of details to sort out. So one thing that we've seen a lot of times in the past that is a concerning thing, that if this mechanism was used to fund product development, engineering, design of files, electrical designs or even mechanical designs, and for whatever reason doesn't get fully paid off, then you've lost your IP, right? A manufacturer quite often, without even this mechanism, will say, oh, we'll finish that 10% for you, right? That DFM, or you said your design is 90% done, like, don't pay us, we'll finish it off. And when you go to request files, the relationship's falling apart. That's when you find out the manufacturer believes this is our design. This is not what you brought us, right? And so that's where startups or entrepreneurs feel like they've had their IP stolen. And it's really, I feel like, more of a fumble. You didn't really lock that up very clearly up front, whether it's financially or contractually or anything else. So those types of areas are concerning for me from protecting the startup. And there's a lot of those types of things that, to your point, taking this as a starting point and crafting it, to the particular situation, I think is really important.
Yeah.
So I originally didn't develop this for you. Like, this is really meant for, yeah. But
for me.
so this originally is meant for strictly investors. This was not designed for a partnership thing. And I've already talked with one of your colleagues about the fact that if you guys are looking for something similar to this, there is different mechanisms that we can pull that are very similar to this, and it literally would be a version of this to make sure that you guys are handled properly and there's the right connection between these. And it sounds like that's what product companies like CEOs like you would love to partner with him. But this was really meant for investors. This is meant for, hey, here's a check. There's no purpose in this. There's no piece where that is done. I've actually developed, before I developed the Hero Note, I actually developed what's called the Wage Note. And that's closer to what you guys are doing. It is meant for fractional executives, service providers to be able to tally up pieces, like let's say you're going to charge them X amount, you can fractionalize some of that as equity or deferring it onto a convertible note. And we could very easily do the exact same thing, but utilize, instead of a convertible note with interest and it converts into equity, we could tie it into the hero note. And so I think something like that would probably fit your guys' need better because it ties in your service agreement into it, protects you with that. And so I think we could very easily, and that's one of the reasons why I would love to have a conversation with you, to be able to create something that actually works with companies and works with your kind of company. So this is really designed as a strictly investor-related document, not, yeah. It's not a CM, but very easily we could get there.
Yeah, and Terry had a good question about confining the use of the money. How easy is that to do in the hero note?
That's really easy to do. Like we could very easily put in a purpose section into the document to be able to make sure that it's, hey, I'm giving you X amount of dollars for X thing. And if you don't use it for that, you've breached and you can now go collect on it. So I think I didn't do that because no convertible note has that. There is a purpose section that you have to use it for business purposes. You can't use it to buy a Porsche. But I'm thinking about it myself. So we're so successful, I was able to buy a Porsche.
If you wrap it with your vote,
Ooh, there you go. I really like that idea.
totally legit.
Yeah.
Wrong audience.
Yeah. But it's one of those things where I wanted to keep it general because I don't want to box people in on these things. I want there to be a lot of flexibility. When I designed this, I try and make it fair between the investor and the company, because I don't want to bend the company over, the startup over to the investor's well, and vice versa. Like, if it's extremely fair on both sides, it's easy for both parties to agree to it. And that's why the safe note and the convertible notes and all these things are usually fairly acceptable in the market. And I didn't want it to go too far.
Okay. Yeah, we got some questions. Any last comments before I think you guys have any last words you want to share? Right. Yeah.
I'll share just one last thing. When we were first investigating this, I was working with an upstart hardware company, and we did approach their CM about making an investment, in kind or otherwise. And the overture was the money will be used to pay you, basically, to utilize your services to build the product. We didn't make a successful, agreement, so we didn't come to terms on it. What it told me was they didn't have the belief in the long-term, necessarily at that time, in the long-term viability of that hardware company or that upstart, which was fine. It was a data point, right? But that was, again, part of the information in my head feeding into, we need a better vehicle. And so I do think there may be room to modify the hero note, because in my overture, it was to bring them in as an investor, partner/investor. So while we're talking about pure investor in the current version of the hero note, I think there may be a modification to accommodate a CM as an investor.
Yeah.
So after hearing about kind of your philosophy as a CM, one of the things that I was thinking about is you do it at cost. And you take all of your profits and you roll those into either equity or increasing that profit. Because, hey, I'm going to mark you up $10K or $20K on this project, but if I defer it to these units, I'm going to get $40K because I believe in you. And so, hey, I'll get my profit margin, I'll get my $20K back in my profit margin, and I'm going to get $20K in preferred shares in your company, is what could end up happening in a situation like this. And so that's where I think a CM, instead of doing an investment, you're deferring some of the profits that you'd be getting. You're still making sure everyone's getting paid at your company, but you don't get your profits. And that's what you're investing in it. And so that reduces the cost for the companies and creates more of that partnership. And so that's where I'm thinking where we could combine my previous note that I created, a wage note, and the hero note to create this beautiful baby for CMs.
Well, and the other beautiful thing too with that is that you potentially get a customer you weren't going to get, right? Is that all that profit, you think, oh, well, I'm going to lose a profit, but actually, very good chance you would never have gotten that profit anyway, because that customer is likely not going to have the funds or go with you in that case. And if you're presenting the whole package, right, it could be a very sweet deal. So, do we have the question mic here? I think we can move on to some Q&A.
Two questions. One is for actually getting out there and trying to use this note. Have you guys thought through sort of how to approach investors? Do you have a Rolodex of investors who are like, hey, I want to use this thing and send me some hardware startups? What are you guys thinking about as far as that next step there?
That is a very good question. I think, Matt is going to make a website that is going to explain a lot more intricacies of how to use the note. As far as, and then we're Jeff, Paul, Cal, we're all thinking about how we can, I think there has been a lot of interest even as we've just been socializing this. And so certainly with other governments and things and in places like Taiwan where countries that are just a lot more accepting of hardware, they're a lot more familiar with hardware. Actually, we might start to go a little more global. But yeah, it's interesting. I think we need to get more feedback first before we really figure it out. But the first step is really fine tuning it and crossing the T's.
So I'm imagining it's probably going to operate very similar to the Y Combinator safe note. Y Combinator got their predominance in the market. That's why we worked with the partners. That's why they created it, is because they already have this notoriety in the market. That's why all of you guys are here, is because of what everyone else, why this group. So because of their notoriety, because everyone's here, we give it all to you for free. Then you guys go to investors, they start talking to people. It just starts slowly getting natural momentum behind it. And I'm going to write a white paper on it it's kind of like a little one-pager that explains the mechanisms, how it works, and all of these things, and then how to fill it in. So that way it makes it easier enough for you guys to hopefully use with counsel as help.
And then a second question, and it's fine if the answer to this is just no, but what about hardware as a service companies? Any applications
They're out
there?
Yeah, no, this is because the whole core mechanism is tying it to the unit sold. That it is really not built for hardware as a service, and mostly because that really fits with most of the traditional models a lot better. But I don't know if anyone had anything to add to that, but yeah, I don't. This probably won't quite be the right fit for hardware as a service.
I have kind of a fundamental question, mostly for Terry. It would theoretically be natural that CMs would be best positioned to actually make use of the hardware itself as collateral, and such that it could be used as security for any kind of notes. And I'm wondering how often that actually is true, or is it such that the components themselves are so specialized that you really can't use them on any of your other projects, and they can't really be used as security for any kind of loans?
Well, as soon as you turn them into something unique, right, we can't do much with them. Most of the components we use in a lot of places, right? But there are certainly a number of things, and usually the more expensive things that are unique, right? But as soon as you make a product that's never been made before, and we don't control an app, or we don't control the end consumer or anything else, it's a paperweight for us, right? it's materials plus labor now that's sitting there, right? So it's not a huge value. If they don't pay for it, we're just kind of left holding the bag. So we'll try to, like I said, stage materials coming in smaller chunks, and we'll build in smaller runs to try to minimize that risk if somebody doesn't have the cash flow to really fund and keep going, right? We want to set up and run and keep running as much as we can, but in certain cases we can't do that. We kind of, set up and run a few and, kind of do that just from a risk management standpoint. So it's hard. Back to your point earlier on, we don't want to try to choose if we believe in a customer or not, right? If you believe in it and you have the funding, we will provide a service, and we'll provide a great service. And it's a really clean, simple transaction. Once you start, investing, this has been historically our view, right? Once you start investing, then we want to start looking at, well, I think I could probably do sales and marketing better than your team. And I've got some great operations people that, why don't you let them take a look at what you start creeping into, and we don't want to do that typically. But at the same time, again, there are reasons why, something like this, and potentially maybe not even marrying everything together, the COGS and our markup, and the service costs and everything else, there still could be a way to provide that service and separate out the investment piece, even if it was coming from us, right? We can kind of keep a clean line between the two, because as soon as we start talking about combining everything and deferring profits, and I go through the contracts, and that starts just giving me a headache thinking about how we're going to write that up or how we're going to come to an agreement where it's really, really clear between the parties, not just the parties' legal counsel, right?
Those could be coincidentally equals. The profit you're investing in, the way Matt was describing it earlier, could be your normal contract with a separate investment deal that's just coincidentally equal to the profit you were going to forego to invest. You know what I mean? So you can keep that distinction between them. We did try going through a lot of this with a different CM in that scenario I was sharing earlier.
So just to close it out, so the residual value to like a CM of the underlying hardware is fairly negligible.
Yeah.
Yeah, to a degree, without the rest of it, right? Most of the things we're making these days is a hardware plus some sort of app or sensors, or there's something else that's really driving a lot of the value behind just the hardware, right? So without all of it, it has marginal value.
Yeah, I mean, we have run into this many times, and it's almost never been feasible to get anything like a reasonable value. And you kind of think about if it's a fabric, right? It's been sewn and cut, and you can cut it up into smaller pieces. Maybe if you can do something with that. If it's electronics, it's it's a board, and it's all maybe you can take out the most expensive components, but then how do you sell them? How do you use them, right? It's a lot of labor and a lot of defects. Within that, you're going to have some problems. And, who wants a run of things that has 1 out of 50 defects, right? So it's very difficult.
Manufacturing is not a 50, 70, 90% margin business, right? There's not a whole lot of fat to start figuring out what you do after you've put it together and quality checked it and packed it to try to recoup any sort of value. It's just it's a mess.
Oh, yeah, I think we spoke to it to a degree, but my super ignorant newbie question to the investing world was, ideally, who do we want to get this in front of? Do we want to get this in front of founders and startups and they would pitch it to investing groups? Do we want to get this in front of investors and they can pitch it downward? Where's like the value? Who's your ICP? Who needs to see this first or most? Where's it most useful?
Everyone.
Yeah. That's what I figured from the last question. Yeah.
Anyone that is in this space is the answer. Like, whether it starts at the companies or whether it starts with the investors, it doesn't matter. The goal is you got to start bombarding the market with it to be able to get it standardized.
Yeah. The way that we've viewed this, the investment side again, or the way we've partnered with some other companies, with whether they're investors or small funds, where we are a manufacturer partner, a trusted partner of the investor or the fund, to where if they're investing in companies, they're sending them to us because they know that we will get them through, right? So that is a partnership mechanism in this, where it's a three-party almost thing, not just two, right? That's where we've kind of drawn that line. So that's how we've approached it in the past. But again, it's like I said, it's an interesting new wrinkle on it for us.
My answer to your question would be yes, all of the above. But what I would really encourage is anybody who has a hardware company, who's gone to an investor, and they've said, too much money up front, too long till I get paid back, go back to them. Take the hero note and go back to them. This gives you a quicker return. This de-risks that discussion we had. So my encouragement would be to really, for me personally, I know more hardware founders that are trying to raise capital than I know hardware investors who are looking for places to throw money. So I would encourage every hardware founder, go back to those investors you were talking to who gave you the typical answer that we heard here. I've worked with dozens of founders who've heard it. Everyone's heard it. In this room, everyone's probably heard it. So go back to them first. So really,
So when
founders.
Are you opening the referral Rolodex so I can just send you those people?
You can bring us founders who are trying to raise money.
3 a week I talked for that. Yeah. Perfect.
But hopefully, I can only imagine a high percentage, whatever it is, it's higher than 50, of the reason that they're getting told not really our thing is because of the long duration and the capital intensive on the return. This is addressing that. Go back to those people who declined you and ask if this changes their mind, if they'd consider a smaller, investment. Make a play that you might not have made under a traditional convertible or safe note.
Yeah, family offices might be one of your better options because they're looking to diversify their portfolio. Like they're looking to invest in startups, real estate, everything. So if they're looking at this and saying, hey, I'm going to get paid back, like double my money in 2 to 3 years, that's a solid investment, even if it's if it's a 50-50 shot or less, invest in 10 of them, 2 of them pay off, I've now made more money.
Yeah, I was just going to comment to basically that point that Jeff just made, because as I've worked as a startup advisor who's talked to probably about 250 startups just this year, building hardware, and I could say this fills like a logic gap between the folks. So you earn your friends and family round. If you're fortunate enough to have a good friends and family round, that's how you get past this stage. Otherwise, everyone just kind of gives you the spiel, which is, hey, I don't see enough traction. I don't see this. They're giving you some sort of excuse. This is a tool, a logical bridge that a founder who doesn't have good friends and family to actually mathematically form that logic bridge for a capital-minded person to then like, no, this is why you want to pay attention, because I can show you the math that if I can do my end of the deal, you'll be just fine. So I just want to highlight how that the function of this really does fill a gap for hardware folks specifically.
As somebody who's dealt with collusion before, I would say that going through this document, perhaps scenario plan how investors and CMs could possibly square out the founder with this document. With this new standardization, I've actually pursued deals like this before, and I saw it coming a mile away, but I was contractually driven to basically finishing out the job that I had to do. And I got squared out, and I didn't make any money. So that's because, the person with the money that came in and the person that was making the product in another way was able to, use a contract against me. So I would say, for naive founders, actually, perhaps scenario plan how this could actually disadvantage folks, where equity might be actually the best opportunity for them to grow their company and figure out what they're trying to do, rather than trapping them into this. Now you need to give up your IP. If there's great agreement between investor and CM, and they see awesome opportunity to snatch this up, they got the lawyer firepower to absolve this agreement. I mean, yes, it's an agreement. It's 25 pages, but there's some pretty smart people out there. I'd love to hear your response, please.
Yeah. So I drafted it. I'm probably a really smart attorney. There's no IP locked in here. There's no obligation. If this all goes belly up, you walk away. Like,
Who does, though?
huh?
The
Founder.
founder, the IP creator.
Yeah, you can walk away from this at any point. Like, you could close up shop. Like, you could raise all this money and realize, like, spend it, and then realize that it's not going to go anywhere and close up shop. Like, there's no trap here. Like, I am probably one of the most founder-friendly attorneys. That's my job. I literally work as in-house counsel for 30 to 40 startups. I advise VCs, angels, so I understand what they're looking for. I've built my reputation on being extremely fair to startups. I've literally made sure that there are enough avenues for you to get out of this and protect yourself. There's no IP locked up. It's not securitized. It is a extremely safe document for startups. I would not build something that wasn't.
Great.
And the real mechanisms are pretty simple and straightforward. So it's not very confusing either.
I
As far
just don't understand how IP that's tied to a company where there's then debt being involved in the process is not liable, like for being essentially recovered in some type of like liquidation.
Oh, you're never going to get your IP. If someone wants to get your IP if someone wants to get your IP, like if you're closing up shop, I'm sorry, you don't deserve your IP. That's the reality of it. Like,
I don't know about that.
No, I'm telling you as an
But if
attorney,
they
as
force
someone
you
that
to
works.
close up. I mean, if they find a way to force you to close up, that's how they could swear you out of your IP.
Yeah, but I've literally designed this where they can't close the note on this. Like like to where you have the opportunity to pay it off. As long as you put that maturity date far enough out and you can keep raising money, you can pay off these other notes. There's lots of ways for you to clear out your debt. But if you have to close up shop and you have debt on the books, that your IP will get sold during the bankruptcy. Granted, during that bankruptcy, that investor is going to have to spend $100K plus to get your IP during the bankruptcy. Because the bankruptcy is going to cost $100,000 for that attorney to walk it through and get all of it. I'm literally going through, one of my jobs is buying up distressed beauty companies. And doing an ABC is costing us anywhere between $50,000 and $150,000 to purchase the IP, all of the inventory, the whole company, all the assets.
I mean, that's great, but that's arguably chump change to like a pair of a really smart CM and a really smart investor who could basically just run a bunch of these and grab all the IP and then build the entire business themselves.
Yeah, but the thing is, you also have to be somewhat like, this isn't bulletproof, but it means you have to actually understand the terms and make sure that you can hit those marks.
Yeah.
As long as you can hit the marks, you're protected.
I'm just worried about other naivete inventors, startup founders that walk into potential traps that that could be hiding behind this vehicle to potentially walk into.
And that's where you, as a startup, you need to have an attorney that's protecting you and telling you these are bad terms, you're going to get screwed. That's why you need to. That's why I'm out there, because I don't want them to be.
What are they using now to protect that outcome? Because you're raising it not against the
Yeah,
Hero
I
Note
think
specifically,
equity,
but what do
right?
they use now to protect themselves? Because I think this note's been written with a very dedicated protection of a founder. But I hear what you're saying, and I'm just curious, what do they use today to protect from that outcome?
I think like really well aligned backers who are equity backers who are just in it for the long run. Like they
is way safer for a startup.
You're right, because it's not debt.
There's no debt.
Right, it won't force it.
Yeah, if there's no debt, then there's no issue. But I work with a number of VCs and angels, and I will never advise them to ever use a safe note. Every startup that I work with, I advise them to get as much safe notes as they can.
Yeah,
Like,
this is the exact alignment problem.
No. But the thing is, there is striking the balance between, and that's what in my opinion, a solid convertible note balances both of those.
But
issues.
don't you recommend that there's other avenues to fund these businesses other than just these things?
No, I've never seen anything other than safe notes, convertible notes, or a priced round.
Well, I'm saying in the art of building a business around a product, that one might actually need to build other sources of bringing in capital other than just the hero. Like that is that a recommendation that Hero might make?
I would say if you can get if you're a product company and you can raise on safe notes, raise on safe notes.
Okay.
Like I'm never going to tell you don't do that. That's the best thing that you can get. But the problem is the reason why people, Greg and everyone came to me is because you guys aren't raising on safe notes. No one's like, yeah, here's a bunch of money. Give me a safe note.
The most founder-friendly investment vehicle is a safe note, right? So investors don't love them because they're mostly founder-friendly. So the safe note came out, it's now 10 years. It was 2013 when it came out. 2014, the KISS note came out from 500 startups. Why? Because too many investor protections were stripped out in the safe note, and too many investors were saying, I'm not investing on a safe note. So they came out with something that put a few investor protections back in. But if you go safe note, KISS note, convertible, investors always want to be here. Founders always want to be here. So this kind of is a little bit of a hybrid. It is a convertible, but it's more here. But I just don't think you're going to, on a product company, I think you're going to have a very hard time getting investors to put up sizable enough money to move the business. So this is better than a standard convertible for a founder. It's much more friendly for a founder than a traditional convertible, yet it's not going to be nearly as founder friendly as the safe note. So to us, this is that kind of middle ground that we're trying to find a sweet spot that will entice investors to invest and not push back on, it's a safe note. So I think that's where we ended up.
I think it's just pushing everything short-sighted. It's like, here's a way of getting the money. Like it looks way de-risked for a bunch of people, and then it's like if you don't figure it out, you owe all this money and you're going in debt and you have to close up shop. Like I have a few hardware products and they haven't come to fruition in 3 years. I'm continuing to iterate. I'm working on these products. Like the forcing function of raising money obviously is important, but I could imagine that like this will force more out of it will force several high achieving companies that are looking to invent truly new products out of business more than it would help them get to market.
Only if they choose this vehicle versus if they can get a safe note. He said it, I would repeat it. I think anybody here would get a safe note. Mm-hmm. But you've got to be able to convince an investor to go on a safe that's much more friendly to you, where your terms are, than the investor pool that I know in the hardware space.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I think the gentleman behind you had a comment or a question. I don't know.
Yeah, it was a related question. Is just private credit is, somewhat in a moment right now, but I wonder if anyone has any numbers on like how often creditors actually go after IP, because it seems like the IP is something that's really mostly useful for the business itself, and it seems like it shouldn't really be that often that creditors really go for the IP, and I wonder if there are any stats that support that theory.
None of the angels or VCs that I know of have really gone after IP.
To that point, every startup, typically every startup values their own idea more than anybody else, right? And they also know more about it, and they've made a lot more mistakes and learned from all of that. And so, by the time you're going out of business, one is your IP. How many years does it have left, right? If you were working on it for 7 years, you've you've only got that 10, 13 years left, and then if you've already tried it and it's failed, then who's ready to pick up all the costs, especially with hardware? Hardware is hard, right? And examples might be a CM, right? CMs typically don't have. Well, but they don't have the marketing, right?
I was saying that like a strategic investor might pick it up. So another company that's sort of in the space wanting that startup to succeed didn't want to spend R&D dollars, but now has the startup that's taken them like 50% of the way there. They could pick up that IP pretty easily.
For sure. Strategic would be the best.
But the
And kind of the only fit. I think we have seen that with strategic. Yeah.
the recourse to do that is through bankruptcy court, correct? So you're already you have a built-in obstacle. Is that fair? It's not like you have a first lien, correct?
No, so this is not a secured note
Yeah.
at all. So
Exactly.
you have to go through bankruptcy court. You're going to have to spend money to get this IP. And you're talking about not a couple months, but 6+ months probably to secure this.
Can there be a clause in there that basically absolves that potentiality route?
No. There's no way you can absolve not getting the IP because that is you have debt on the company. So you if there is a bankruptcy during the bankruptcy, if someone actually was like, I want to go through bankruptcy proceedings,
That could be the only value there is to go get, right?
it is
That's the only value. You got some desks and chairs. Yeah. Right.
No, someone would have to buy it as part of it. So let's say it's worth like, what if they evaluate it at $1 million and you've only got debt of $250? Well, guess what? They have to cough up another $750. So that means they have to get an expert witness in there to evaluate it, get it price point it, and do all these things. Most
This
companies
is also in the scenario where there's a CM. Like, what if there's machinery? Like, most of the time when I'm pricing out building products, it's buying what I need to manufacture the product. So on the investor side,
is that worth anything?
No, I mean it's any equipment you probably have would just be a drop in the bucket of what we've already got. So if there's something really, really unique, maybe it has a little bit of value, but generally I wouldn't think so. And from a CM perspective, again, we do industrial consumer medical products in every industry. Like there's no way we could take it, just to your point, if you've already been trying to make it succeed, only focusing on that, to then try to not just take the hardware, but figure out the app and the cloud and the customer base and your distribution channels and your, it's just so much more work than we're already doing. It's not worth the effort. Gentleman in the back.
There's an entire network of companies that specialize in reselling IP from bankrupt companies. It's almost always brands. It's rarely anything but brands. I used to work for one based in Scotland, and that's really the only place to go with it. No one's just going to buy it. And I mean, in bankruptcy court, you talk about valuation, forget it. It's not worth it. Unless there's a huge amount of revenue attached to the IP, in which case the company, if they went bankrupt, there must be some other fatal flaw. So really, it's the secondary market, and you're going to get 10 cents on the dollar that was invested. You can buy some good IP, but it's mostly brands, occasionally formulas or materials or whatever. So that's where it ends up. It's kind of the low-price junkyard. There's nowhere else. No one. It's not really useful to anybody else. So, thanks.
I bet he's got interesting stories.
All right. Well, I want to thank our panelists. You guys have been amazing. Thanks to Matt for pulling this all together. And thanks to you guys for coming in prepared with good questions. We're kind of keeping it behind the veil, big on launching now. Hopefully you were able to get a picture of our emails. If not, Eventbrite is one way to reach us. Silicon Valley in your pocket is another best way to reach us. Wolf and Snow?
Yeah, mlopez@wolfendsnow.com.
And if all that else fails, ask ChatGPT to find us on LinkedIn. Thanks, guys. Have a great night. I'm glad you made it, man.
I think that's going to make a big